In this video, I'm going to share with you 6 hacks to master the bass in no time. If you want to be gig ready, the kind of bass player that everybody wants to play with, I'm going to show you these tricks that are going to just absolutely transform your bass playing overnight. I can't even say that with a straight face. Now, let me just share with you kind of why I did that. I saw a post earlier today, and I got some notes here to keep me on track, but I saw a post from someone who I really respect, one of the OGs in the game. I really respect, and I felt where they were coming from with this post when they were talking about the buzzwords. And the first thing we have to kind of address is that the internet game is... Hang on one second. I'm waiting on a FedEx package now. So I have to kind of look at. Anyway, the internet is, the algorithm, the almighty algorithm has to be triggered, right? So you might have clicked on this video because of the title, right? Now, I don't believe that there are any shortcuts. You got to put in some work sometimes. But what is the work that you put in? Scott's Bass Lessons put out, Scott and Ian did a fantastic live stream about a month ago about the dark side of YouTube. And, worth a watch for sure. But, the truth of the matter is that people that put out content on the internet regularly, if you see videos from somebody like myself, or Kyle Teaches Bass, or PD Bass, or anybody, and you see videos on a regular basis, it means there's a business end of some sort, right? That is in play, and it has to be in play, right? But in order to get views, we have to create content around things that people are looking for. There's search, keyword research, and stop it, and all this stuff. And so you got to kind of play a certain game. But I am going to follow through with you on some things. Again, I just want to put out the caveat. There are no shortcuts. There is work that needs to be done. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a one size fits all. I don't think that there's one size fits. I don't think there's one size that fits all, right? There isn't. There's differentiated learning. People have different goals. The goals of a 50-year-old are different than the goals or needs of a 13-year-old, right? But I believe that the best place to start is with music that you love. And I'm going to look down here. I really want to stay on track, and I have some notes that I've written here. What kind of music do you love? I've said it before. What kind of music do you want to play? Who do you want to play it with? That's sort of your true north, right? How you learn these things, I'm going to tell you, it depends. But let's get into what I think these 6 core areas are that musicians, period, doesn't matter, but we're bass players, so I think every musician needs. Physical technique. You need to be able to play the instrument. You need to be able to interface with the instrument. You need to not be relearning how to hold the instrument every time you pick it up. Right. And, surprisingly, there are folks that, and I say surprisingly, not as an insult. I'm not trying to insult anybody, but, there are folks that, like, every time they sit the bass aside and pick it up again, it's like they have to relearn the ergonomics of that. And, you gotta work on that. Now, I did just put out a video last week, for a very specific reason, right, on how to hold the bass and posture. Now, let me be 100% honest with you. Do you think that that's a video that I made because my heart was just in, oh, I just want to make this video? No. But I think it's helpful. And I think that I'm trying to grow a YouTube channel. I'm not trying to grow a YouTube channel. I am growing a YouTube channel. My audience is growing. My reach is growing. But a part of that is I know that there's a community out there that is served by that content. And so that is the content that I made. And if you are someone who is interested in getting into the YouTube space, I will tell you right off the bat, there's a delicate balance between the content that you want to create and the content that people are searching for, right? There's two ways to show up on the internet, period. There's browse and there's search, for those who may not know. And I just want to touch on this just for a second, is that browse is like you click on YouTube and boom, oh, that looks interesting, right? And what looks interesting? The title, the thumbnail. The title, the thumbnail. And then YouTubers, I don't like that term because it sounds so juvenile, but YouTubers have to then, when they're looking at their KPIs, click-through rate being one of those things. It's like you look at impressions, click-through rate. How many times is YouTube showing your thumbnail to people, and how many times are they clicking to watch it, right? Impressions, click-through rate. Now, the title. So you kind of have to, it's this game that we have to play, and the sort of moral dilemma is, how much do I play this game and then stick with my integrity and say, I'm going to tell you, there are no hacks. I said it in a live stream or a video about a couple of weeks ago. I was like, if you don't know the notes on your instrument and you've been playing for like a month, it's because you don't want to know them. The end. It's because you do not want to know them. That is tough love for somebody. That is tough love. You don't want to know them. Okay. So physical technique. Let me get back on task here. Physical technique. You have to be able to play. You need a good sense of rhythm and time feel. I don't care what anybody says. The job of a bass player is the bridge between rhythm and harmony. If you don't have a good sense of time, feel, and rhythm, forget about it. But that's every musician needs a good sense of musical time and rhythm. The end. What else do you need? You need fretboard knowledge, right? So we talked about rhythm, right? Well, you need to know where the what is, where it is on the instrument. So you need some fretboard knowledge, right? You don't need to know, and I'm going to talk about this in just a second, but you don't need to know everything there is to know about music theory. Somebody made an interesting. Let me move on to the next point, and I'm gonna point this out, right? You need to know. Let me get to the next point here. The next point is you need functional harmony. You need to know functional harmony. Functional harmony. Do I need to be an orator to have a YouTube channel? Nope. Do I need to be the best communicator in the world to have a YouTube channel? Nope. Do I need to be the best bass player in the world to have a bass-related YouTube channel? Nope. And let me tell you, I fall into this all the time. Comparison traps and imposter syndrome and all that. Right? Ain't nobody gonna beat me at being me. That's another story. You need functional harmony, right? When I was living in Thailand, I needed enough Thai to be courteous, to say please and thank you, and I only want a regular massage. I gotta keep it PG. I'm trying to be funny, but you know. So functional harmony. 1s, 4s, 5s, 6. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm trying to distill that, you know, like make that too simple, too fast. But I made a video a couple months ago or something, about the first modes that I think you should learn. The first modes that I think you should learn. Not all of the modes I think you should learn, but the first modes. Ionian, Lydian, Mixolydian. And somebody commented, I don't need to know modes. I only need to know what key we're in the chord progression. And I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I was like, oh, so you need to know modes, right? Like, I'm saying that 1, 4, and 5 because that's the 1, the 4, and the 5, and that is the basis of so much music. And if you're playing pop music that you hear on the radio, chances are you're going to hear a lot of 1 chords, a lot of 4 chords, a lot of 5 chords, a lot of 6 chords, right? Like 1, 4, 5, and 6. You're going to hear them a lot. So you need to know that, right? You need to know that. Let me move on. Pattern recognition. You need to, goes right along with the functional harmony. If I just said to you, you should know, if anything, 1, 4, 5, 6. I'm not saying that you need to stop there. I'm not saying that to you at all. Nobody come from me. Also, to my bass creators out there as well, my bass players out there, in the comments, even in this live chat, feel free to leave your ideas. What do you, we can build a stronger, more supportive, more confident community, right? I want this to be a space where everybody shares their ideas. So, pattern recognition. You got to know where those patterns are under your fingers. It's not just enough to have the head knowledge, right? You got to be able to address it. Stylistic integrity. Stylistic integrity. Context is everything. You know, when you're, you know, what's the right tool for the job? What's the right tone for the job? What's the right energy, a touch? You know, am I going to be thumping and plucking on a ballad? You know what I mean? What's stylistically appropriate? So let me just run through that list again without the jabbering. Physical technique. You got to be able to play. You got to have a good sense of rhythm and time. You need fretboard knowledge. You need functional harmony. You need pattern recognition. You need stylistic integrity. I'll give you an example of stylistic integrity. I'm not there are people who play reggae, right? And this brother, Don Strumental, if you're into reggae, this guy, like his channel, I believe, is dedicated to reggae bass playing. Don Strumental, I think that's what it is. But this gig I played on Bourbon the other day, they wanted to play the song Valerie by Amy Winehouse, but in a reggae style. So what I needed to do in that moment was have just enough reggae knowledge, just enough information about that style to be able to pass it off as but somebody who's really into that would be able to tell, you know, you're doing all right, you know what I mean? But you understand what I'm saying? But the stylistic integrity enough to be able to get through it in that moment, not to go on tour with a reggae artist. Does that make sense? I'm sorry I said that. I don't like when people say, does that make sense? But it's like part of our vernacular. Anyway, now, how you learn that stuff, it depends on a lot of things. You know, it depends on your learning style. It depends on who you like. You know, if I go on YouTube right now and do a search for anything on YouTube. How to play reggae bass. First of all, I can't spell reggae, but clearly, if it weren't for like auto spell and stuff like that, I would be absolutely, I would be screwed, is what I would be. But let's take a look at something. I don't know why my screen is like that. Well, that's okay. It's okay. Let's do this. If I do this search, this is the guy right here. Donstrumental. If you are into reggae bass, this is the guy. This guy right here. But now, look at this. Look at these thumbnails. I just want to give you some perspective about the YouTube landscape, right? This is the guy right here. To me, this guy right here is the authority. Donstrumental is the authority on reggae bass. I think he's in my mind, he's the authority on reggae bass. So, but it's those titles, it's those thumbnails that make us, that even me, when I'm searching for something completely not music related, it's something that, what thumbnail is enticing, what title is enticing. But now, and here's where the brother who made the post on Facebook that inspired this live stream. Here's what is the important thing. The video has to deliver on the promise. The video has to deliver on the promise, right? So those 6 things that I told you, when I started this out, and I said, quite tongue in cheek, I said, I'm gonna do all this stuff and all that. Now, I'm telling you why I did that. But these 6 areas, you need those things. You need those things. How you get to them, it's like we could all agree that we need to be able to add, multiply, subtract, and divide. I think we all could agree on that. But we all had different teachers. You know what I mean? We all had different teachers. I'm not good at math at all. Math overwhelms me, but I'm kind of like dispelling the myth about musicians being good at math. Mathematics in a musical sense makes sense to me, right? But like when it comes to like doing other stuff, I'm like, I don't want to do it. But I've had math teachers along my academic journey that were able to get complex ideas across to me, right? I'm not a fan of any educator or creator who takes a stance of what I say is right and everybody else is wrong. That is the issue that I have with Jeff Berlin. And Jeff Berlin is an amazing bass player. And he's got I think he's a great educator as well. I think his a lot of his academic ideas are sound. I would never discourage someone from reading music. I read music, learning how to read music and reading music, keeping that skill sharp is something that I never have regret. It just opened up an entire world of possibility for me, and led to a long career in theater. I would never discourage somebody from doing that, but I don't agree that written music is the first stop. I don't believe that. I don't believe that it's the first stop. I think it's something that you should do if you're serious about really expanding, for sure. But nobody learns a language by first reading it. We just don't learn like that. That I believe pretty strongly in. And this video is not about Jeff Berlin at all. But he's the first person that comes to mind when I think of somebody who has a very I'm right and everyone else is wrong sort of stance. I'm just I just don't really get into that. But let me recap here real quick, because you guys may get, if this bass comes today, you'll get another live stream today. It was supposed to come yesterday, and it didn't come. And so FedEx has updated me. I'm being held hostage currently by FedEx, waiting for a delivery that needs to be signed for. So let me restate the 6 things that I think every musician needs, and how you get these skills, how you master these skills or get competent at these skills, is going to depend on how you learn and where you're getting your information from. Physical technique, you got to be able to play. You just have to be able to operate the instrument. You need a good sense of rhythm and time, musical time. You need fretboard knowledge. You got to know where stuff is. Functional harmony. You got to, at the ground floor, you got to know that there are 7 chords and 7 notes in a major scale. Major scale is the mother of all harmony. You can trace everything back to the major scale. You can use it as, in the same way, I don't know if this is a good example, like a formula. Let's call it a formula. I was going to say PEMDAS or something like that, because that's like the only thing I remember about math class in an academic sense. Like a formula, right? There are 7 notes in a major scale. Each one of those notes will form another scale, otherwise known as a mode. Each one of those notes has an associated chord. Major, minor, minor, major, major or dominant, minor, diminished, right? Now, out of these chords in popular music, the ones that you're going to see the most, let's take away the 7. You will see it and it will exist. I'm not telling you at all that it's not important. So let's take away the 7 chord, right? And let's take away, I got to be careful how I do my fingers, and let's take away 3. I'm not saying that they aren't important. Do not come for me in the comments about I'm saying they're not important, because I'm not saying that they're not important. I'm saying that at the ground floor, learn the 1, Ionian, the 2, Dorian. We'll come back to Phrygian some other time. The 4, Lydian. The 5, Mixolydian. And the 6, Aeolian. Because a lot of the music, if you're watching YouTube, if you come to YouTube as a source of inspiration, as a source of information, chances are, And I do not mean to be insulting in any way when I say this. But most people go to YouTube for quick information or entertainment. Let me know in the chat if I'm wrong. If you think I'm off base. I'm okay with being off base. But I think, if I think about it right now in this moment, I think that most people come to YouTube for quick information and entertainment. That said, many of you are either beginners, I'll say advanced beginners. You're returning to the instrument. Maybe you used to play a long time ago and you're coming back to the instrument. Let me know if I'm off base. I'm cool with being off base. You get what I'm saying? So Indy9 says that's exactly why I use YouTube, right? And then when you want to get more serious or deeper, then you buy courses, you join memberships, you know, and things like that. But that still has to lead you somewhere if you are serious about the instrument. My goal when I had a bigger private studio, when I was teaching a lot of private students, I say, you know, I'm not going to retire off this student. This is not going to be my student for life. You know what I mean? I want to be able to teach them how to teach themselves. You know? What do you need to be able to do? You know, I could tell you, you know, I play most of my working life as a musician, especially over the last couple of years, has been either a band that I, you know, like a cover band or something that I play with all the time. And it's usually the same amount of songs, the same kind of rotation of songs. And then there's, you know, heart projects where you're, you know, like creating, writing, wrestling through different ideas with other people. And then there's gigs like the one that I, you know, hey man, I need a bass player. I need a bass player on Saturday from this time to this time. The pay is this much. And there's no song list. All right, cool, no problem. I'm not doing anything that day. I can come out there. But what skills do I need to be able to survive that? All the things that I just said. And I would add, to do that, I need a catalog of songs that is in my head, you know, that I've either played or I can fake my way through. So when somebody says, you know, the singer says to me on the bandstand, she's like, you know, and I just met this woman. I knew the drummer, and it was me, a drummer who I knew and had played with before, a keyboard player, and a singer. That's it. And the gig was from 12 o'clock in the afternoon to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It's a lot of time to fill. So a lot of, do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? And, you know, so that's a whole different skill set, right? But when she turns around and said, we're going to do Valerie. Okay, no problem. But Valerie at dunk, 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 with the whole kind of rockabilly faith thing is different from boom, 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 boom. So what did I need to know to be able to pull that off? The physical aptitude, rhythm, fretboard recognition, functional harmony. I needed some patterns and stylistic knowledge. I'm not at all saying that those are not, I'm not at all saying that those are the only things you need. What you need is going to depend on what you want. And I'm going to land the plane here. I think this is a good place to land the plane. What you need is I think should be triggered by what you want, like what you really want. All right? So I've been on this question for a long time, and I think it's a question that everybody needs to ask. What kind of music do you want to play, and who do you want to play that music with? I think that's a great place to start. And when I say what kind of music do you want to play and what music gets you excited? This is the difference between the age that we live in now and the age when a lot of us were coming up. Is when I was coming up, and I said I was going to land the plane, and I'm going to continue to land the plane, but I do think this point is important. When I was growing up, my early life, Armed Forces radio, because my dad was in the Air Force. So I was exposed to all the stuff from Motown to like the, what would you call Lawrence Welk and all that, you know what I mean? Of course, pop tunes. And then when my parents split up and I moved back to New Orleans with my mom, there was the music around me, the New Orleans music that was around me that, quite honestly, I didn't care for. I didn't pay attention to it. It was one of those things that was just like there. So that language just got picked up because it was there, like any other language that you're in that environment and you know what I mean? You're just there. So you get that information. But what really drew me was funk music. That was the music that really, and I didn't even have the vocabulary for why I liked it. I didn't know why I liked it. And I'm not saying that New Orleans didn't have funk music, but like the meters and stuff like that, like any other, you don't appreciate your family until you're away from them. Right. But when I heard Prince, it was like, oh, it's over. Prince, Zap, Cameo, So I was drawn to that, and there was a certain quest that we had to go on for music that you guys remember that. So a lot of you guys remember that. When if you had a record, you knew that record front to back, not just the hits. You knew the deep cuts on that record. Gap Band is another one. Gap Band, Yarborough and Peebles, My mother gave me Gap Band 3 in an Easter basket. Matter of fact, I got Gap Band 3 and Yarborough and Peebles in the same, it was like an Easter basket. Love you, Ma. You know what I mean? So that's where it started for me. Let me answer a couple of questions real quick. Andrew Collins, how did that gig go the other day? It was fantastic. It was 2 nights. It was fantastic. It was great. Got to play a lot of synth bass. And I know that some of you guys are going to ask me or wondering when I'm going to do content about the MXR synth bass pedal. That is coming, but I want to do it justice. Indy9 says, when you say who I want to play it with, you mean favorite artist or a group of musicians I know? Great question. So when I say who you want to play it with, yeah, if there's a group of musicians that are in your town, right? So for instance, if there were a band in town that was doing gigs and I wanted to do gigs, right? Man, you know what? I would want to know what songs that band is playing. What songs do they play? It doesn't make sense for me to know a whole bunch of stuff in this bag. If I want to play with them, I want to know what do I need to know to be able to play in that band. You see what I mean? If you don't have a desire to play with a band and you're just like, hey man, I want to play at home. I want to enjoy myself at home. I am going to, I talk about this tool all the time, and I talk about it for good reason. But Songmaster Pro, you can remove the bass track. You can play along with that thing. Say, you know what? This is how the bass would sound if I played on it. If I played on that recording. It's a tool, right? You don't have to play with other people. But I don't think there's one way to learn. I know that there's not one way to learn. I was a teacher for too long. I was a K through 12 educator, and then I was a coach in the school system. And you talk about, like, I don't know if there are any teachers in the room right now, but you got a class of 30 kids. They do not have the same learning style. They don't. And then I was a teacher during COVID, which was a whole different thing. Oh, you talk about the term, the words differentiated learning came up so much because we weren't ready for that. And to be honest, here in New Orleans, I was at a Title I school, so we had varying levels of access. Oh, that could go into a whole different thing. Different levels of access to technology. Basic things like internet, things that most of us take for granted. I had students that were living in hotels and things like that. So, let's get back to the bass thing. I think strongly, and I'm okay with being wrong. I don't need to be right. There's no prize for me being right. But if you haven't given those two questions serious thought, please give them serious. What kind of music do you want to play? Who do you want to play it with? Really, what kind of music do you want to play? What is the music that you go straight to and you're like, ooh, when I'm working at music, when I'm cleaning the house, when I'm washing the car, when I'm doing, when I'm fantasizing, what is the music that does it for me? What is attracting me to the instrument? And then go down that rabbit hole. That's what I think. Hey, you guys might get another live stream today. If the bass comes. I love a good live unboxing. On the screen over there, you see this checklist. It's a little checklist that I put together for you. It is free. It's linked in the description of this video. I'll do a pinned comment in a second where you can grab that and kind of gauge, where am I in my bass playing journey? Where might I be in my bass playing journey? Anyway, you guys have a great Sunday. I hope you had a good 4th. And we out of here, man. Listen, it ain't rocket science. It's pocket science. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one. Peace. 2 fingers.